Welcome to the SaaS Factor.
Today on the SaaS Factor, we have a very special guest. We have the Andy Johnson. He is a family man, a strategic powerhouse, and brings the life of the party to any meeting with a musical twist. So welcome, Andy, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, well, thank you for the kind intro, Kelly. Yeah, so I'm a girl dad of three, so I like to put that on my LinkedIn. It kind of de-villainizes me. My wife accuses me of looking like a Disney villain. You can guess which 1993 cartoon she's alluding to. So there you go. But yeah, I like to really think of myself as a disruptor. I am not satisfied with the status quo of what's happening in employee benefits and healthcare, and I can allude to why. But at the end of the day, I work with teams, other companies, individuals, anybody that has an ear for something that pushes against that status quo.
So, Andy, as we know, many businesses are facing the challenge of vendor fatigue and fragmented services. What would be your advice to companies that are experiencing this?
My first piece of advice might be to digest a little perspective. I think it's honestly pulling it back to 10,000 feet. It's buyer fatigue, something that we all we all have to deal with when you're shopping virtually or at Walmart. But what I've seen in the vendor space and employee benefits was post ACA, you had some emerging companies, point solutions, niche vendors filling some of the gaps in healthcare that were, not really being addressed. But as you fast forward to 2020 and beyond, when something happened and the economy went to a certain point, there is a huge explosion of these new companies. So I think that fatigue got really just drowned out by all the noise of the new emerging companies. And a lot of them had shiny, bright objects and they had a solution in mind. But at the end of the day, I think there's just so much noise that the buyers got so confused and they don't know what to do. And the buyers also goes back to the brokers who are providing those, they're consulting and giving you those solutions. They have fallen back to having to go through a similar process. So when they turn around and have to share with you what they found, they're just as overwhelmed as anybody else. And I think the intention was originally clear to bring a simplification to the healthcare process, improve the care journey. That intention's still there, but I think what we've seen is just this explosion, even post-COVID, when things have slowed down, there isn't a clear path. And I think going back to that buyer journey and looking at that fatigue, I don't suspect it's getting any better. So this goes back to what is the solution? I think it certainly comes back to doing your homework, looking at your group with a real lens as to what the real problems are. Where do we start in a foundation? Then doing some research on your own, looping in your broker and consultant much earlier in the year. The biggest mistake you can make is approaching your renewal with the idea that you're going to start looking at some of these new solutions because you will run out of time. And I've seen this year over year. It's the biggest mistake you'll make.
All right, Andy. So let's talk about culture and collaboration and how those are key in business. And so you are the king of culture. So how do you personally foster a collaborative culture within your team?
Well, I have to give credit to anybody else that I've worked with in the past. I think one theme that I've seen over and over, and I'm looking through this with the lens of sales. Right. I jokingly say most of us are in sales in one form or a fashion. So we are all touching clients, interacting. And at the end of the day, I think when you got into COVID and many of us had to go remote, and it was that weird moment. When you go back, a lot of companies were not ready for that, but they also haven't pivoted since. And despite what any LinkedIn article will tell you with next week, everybody's back in the office. I was in sales role before where I was on my own, driving around, interacting with health systems. And so I know that culture and I know what it took to maintain that collaborative structure. And it requires a lot of extra effort, a lot of communication. And this is where I think collaboration falls in place. A lot of companies, even now, they still haven't figured out how to create a culture that's decentralized, that's cohesive. And I think if you're looking at culture as a foundation, what would be the concrete mix that you're pouring in? To me, that feels like collaboration. But it has to be true in what it is, in that you're actually working with your team for, marketing, for working with your team together. And there's a strategy that I've worked with Sarah on as far as collaborating with selling together in a near bounding strategy, something to address another day. But when it comes down to it, that collaboration promotes that cohesive culture where we're all driving towards a North Star.
That's really, really important. And I'd love to hear your take on that. So, to dive a little bit deeper, would you be able to share your why behind your passion for
Oh
healthcare
my
tech
gosh.
and benefits?
I hate to say this, but it's not a pleasant why. But the why started with the birth of our first child. My wife had her first child back in 2016. And at that point, she was young, healthy, hit all the marks. Doctors had no sign of anything that could come negatively post delivery. And then we get home and her leg starts swelling up. And I'll try to bear any details beyond that. At some point, we had to rush back to the emergency room. And at that point, if anybody's a parent, you have a child, and this was my first child, so I don't know what I'm doing. And I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing 3 in. But back then, even more nerve wracking. And then my wife had to get rushed back to the hospital. And again, to fast forward, everybody's fine now. But in that moment, the chaos that ensued, and in hindsight, I look back like we thought we understood healthcare. We thought we understood how to navigate the system, and we didn't. And here she is being rushed in the ER, going into multiple surgeries. I'm driving back and forth, and my mom's taking care of a baby. And at one point, I go back into the hospital, and no one could tell me where my wife was. She was in the middle of her second surgery, and I'm walking around very frantic, upset, calling her brother because I don't know what to do. The worst part wasn't that per se, it was afterwards. So we get later a bill that claimed that we had an out of network charge. So despite going through the payers health system and doing everything that we thought by the book, through that experience, the scar tissue, the psychological trauma, we also got that out of network bill. And it took 2 or 3 years to pay off. So fast forward a couple of years when I had a chance to join a startup that pushed a disruptive element through this system, I was very eager. And to this day, I still use this as one of those foundational pieces that you go through tough days, and no day was as tough as that, and especially for her. But as I move forward, I like to remind people that as much as you think you know and how simple this healthcare system is, you have to push and fight for change, because if you don't, it's going to take advantage of you in some form or fashion at some point.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, I can totally relate to your story, being a parent, being a first-time parent, and having just never, really having to go to the hospital, deal with the hospital system. Our little girl had to go to NICU. We got tons of bills. We've got, the NICU bill, the hospital bill, the anesthesia bill, my bill, her bill, all the bills, and they start piling, and you're like, I don't even know what to do here. I don't know where to go next. I loved the care that we got from the providers and the nurses and all the team, but like, you just get to a point where you're so fatigued by everything that piles up, and there's no one to help you lend a helping hand, right? And so that's where, the world of benefits and healthcare tech and all that good stuff comes into play. But
Well,
I
and going
can
full
relate.
circle, yeah, going full circle back to, you were mentioning vendor fatigue, buyer fatigue. It's, it goes back to the pressure that goes back to that. Like at the beginning of that, like you're also tasked with like your employees, some of them could be going through this, even if 1%. So out of a company that's 300 deep, that's 3 people that are going to be going through a journey like this. Have you selected the right solutions in place? Do you trust it? And that's a burden that you're going to feel at some point. And even beyond the financials, from a company standpoint, to have your workers taken off like that and psychologically traumatized, it's very tough. And just playing the percentages, it's going to keep happening. So that's why I'm an advocate for solutions that bring simplicity and ultimately just give support to the member. That's really what it boils down to.
That's a good why. We're going to go ahead and pivot over to some fun topics. That's what we do here on the SaaS Factor. And so we're going to have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Andy?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right.
Yes.
So are you a night owl or are you an early bird?
Depends which era of my life. So pre-kid, night owl all the way. Now, early bird, not by choice. If I can stay up and watch a show past like 9:30, 10 o'clock, I am blessed. Because typically there's 5 to 4:30 in the morning that I'm getting woken up by one of 3 girls that are beautiful, and there's no choice. So
Lucky man. You're a lucky man. All right. Beach or mountains?
So I live 10 minutes from the beach. So maybe that answers the question. But if I was on vacation, mountains, because summer vacation, fall, and winter for skiing, snowboarding. Beach, we love, but we live close by as a frequent visit.
Any favorite spot or city in particular?
For beach or mountain?
Either or, maybe both.
The state of Vermont is for mountain, is just the entire state. You can drive around. It's so beautiful. Beach, yes. So if you go up the coast of Maine, where I live, there's a national park called Acadia National Park. And I think, in my opinion, it's a national treasure. Anybody from the Northeast is very aware of it, but I always recommend anybody that hasn't been here that would be your stop. So Google Acadia National Park, Ocean View, and if you aren't excited, then we're not friends.
I love that.
Putting that on my list. All right. Salty or sweet?
Salty.
Ooh.
Me too.
What's your favorite snack?
Healthy or not healthy? Do we?
Salty, healthy, not healthy, all the things.
Depending how you say it, fa.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Any day, or ramen if it's good. If it's just at home, I'm a sucker for barbecue because I'm from Texas and I live in the Northeast, and this isn't a frequent thing here, so I'm gonna take barbecue.
You
Yum.
got to show them the correct way. But I'm sorry to anyone listening up north, but come down south and have some real barbecue.
Yes, agree.
All right, Andy. So what's the last show you binged watch and why should we watch it?
Ooh, true confession. All right. Outlander, if anybody's familiar with this. And I might get some judgment from some guys out there, but my counter to that would be, unless you've actually watched through it completely, then you have no place to judge me. So I'm still a sucker for that. We're going back through the seasons again. So
Good answer. It's on my list. So
Thank you so much for joining us on the SaaS Factor, Andy. We look forward to future conversations, and thanks everyone for joining us on this segment. We'll be dropping more soon. Have a good day. See ya.